Hey, what's the deal? That's your boy Tag from Pro Wrestling Tag. You know what I mean? Of course, you know what that means. You know what I mean? Washing dishes and such. As of this recording, it is 4:35 p.m. You know what I mean? June 3rd, 2025. You know what I mean? I had a crazy day today at work. You know, I'm upset because there was this girl I worked in the bag while I was on the way back home. You know what I mean? Like, she looked as good than a motherfucker. She was Shorty was, what you call big bone, right? You know, a big girl. But she looked good than a motherfucker. She looked like Kelly Price. She looked like Kelly Price with brat braids. I'm like, oh man, I wanted to go and talk, but then I hate cock blocking motherfuckers. You know what I mean? Like, fuck. But I'll get a chance next time. Or trust me, I will get my shot. But not really a lot of stuff has been happening, you know, in terms of free agent news. But then again, sorta. You know, I heard something about Chris Jericho. You know how Chris Jericho is not being, you know, how AEW has no plans for Chris Jericho as we speak. And mind, Chris Jericho is in a contract year. So I honestly would not be shocked if he leaves AEW and goes right back to WWE. It would not shock me at all. I mean, I expect it. You know what I mean? And then I'm hearing about, you know, Wardlow and such. But I want to talk about art, and I also found out something about R-Truth as well. According to Jonathan Coachman, you know, R-Truth was actually lowballed. You know, WWE did offer him a new deal, but, you know, he was, you know, they offered him less money. I mean, look, you know, he's a vet. And so, like I said, it's not an age thing. It's not an age thing. You know, it's basically dead weight and such. But that's another story for another day. The Miz. I want to talk about The Miz. Because I got some things to say about Mike The Miz Mizanin. So, as some of y'all might know, you know by now, you know, Miz actually, you know, removed all mentions of WWE on his Twitter profile. Right? There is no WWE mentions at all on his X account. Right? I still call it Twitter. I don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? On his X account. Which, you know, ironically enough, it happened, you know, a day, you know, on the day after the R-Truth news, right? And what the fuck? Okay. And, you know, then when you see that, right, you're like, oh my goodness, is Miz gone? Is Mike Mizanin gone? So, of course, you know, Sean Ross Sapp on, you know, from Fightful had mentioned that despite Miz taking out all WWE mentions from his Twitter profile, like, he's still under contract with WWE. Now, I don't know how long Mike Mizanin's contract is. I don't know. It might be by the end of this year. I don't know. But I will say this. I personally will say this. I know Mike Mizanin is doing a lot of hosting. You know, I think he's hosting American Gladiators from what I heard and such. So it kind of looks like he's slowly transitioning away from pro wrestling. If not pro wrestling, probably WWE to do his own thing, right? But here's the other caveat in all this. Him and WWE don't really need each other at this point. You know what I mean? They really don't need each other at this point. And I'll say this about Miz, right? Miz to me is hands down the most underappreciated talent possibly in the history of the business, in the history of WWE. This was a guy, you got to think about this. He's been in pro wrestling since 2004. You know, but also remember, you know, he was part of that Real World cast during that time, right? And, you know, he dreamed of being a pro wrestler. You know, he loved pro wrestling and such, you know. In almost every episode, he created the persona of The Miz and such, and he wanted to get into pro wrestling. So, you know, his status basically got him into pro wrestling. And the man was able to carve out a career that a lot of you motherfuckers would dream about. A lot. You know, The Miz was fucking great. You know, character-wise. He might have not been the best in ring, but it doesn't fucking matter. You know what I mean? He was able to carve out character, character after character. Remember, he was a WWE champion. He was a world champion. He won almost every single title you could think of. Remember, people used to criticize him because, he was the safest man in pro wrestling and such. But you know what though? You can always throw that in people's faces. Remember, Bryan Danielson talked shit, right, about Miz, right? And look what happened. Right? Miz is a person who you could have more than relied on, right, in this business, right? He carved out a great career for himself. He did. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Shit. If they didn't like him that much, he would never have been WWE champion. You know what I mean? They liked him so much that they gave him a chance at the strap. You know what I'm saying? They gave him a fucking chance at the strap. And now, with him unfollowing WWE and such, I feel like his run might come to an end and such. If it does, I want to say thank you because he was fucking great. And like I said, that's another thing. He never got hurt. Very rarely did he get hurt. And he also protects you. The motherfucker also protects you. He also protects you. You know what I mean? He also protects you. But I think WWE has, his replacement in terms of that superstar that came from another world onto pro wrestling in Logan Paul. That's your new Miz, right? But they do not need each other at this point. Because as much as Miz, as much as what Miz did for the business, mind you, he was in, the Ruthless Aggression era, then the PG era, then the reality era. You know what I'm saying? And, he fit in great. And again, he a terrific fucking bad guy, a terrific character. In 2025, he's about also what? 44, he'll be 45 this year. Right? With everything being said and done, there's no room at this juncture for Miz in 2025 in WWE. I'm sorry. He had his last big run back in 2016, 2017, and such. And also against, during the Bray Wyatt shit. Not the Bray Wyatt shit. The fucking the Dexter Lewis feud that he had. You know what I mean? He had that. But again, you gotta think. You legit gotta think. Where does Miz stand in today's pro wrestling landscape? In WWE. In WWE, where does he fall? He doesn't fit nowhere. He doesn't. He really does not fit nowhere. And I do think that it's time that him and WWE both part ways. I think it's time. Again, I would not be shocked if they do part ways with each other because again, Miz has done everything that he could legit, he done everything he could in WWE. Maybe it's time for new challenges. Not only he's going to be the host of American Gladiators, but also like he'll fit Hollywood like a hand in glove. He has that Hollywood look anyway. You know what I mean? And WWE is a big part of why he's in that position, right? But if he still, he hasn't talked about retirement, so hell no. With wrestling retirement, like that's poppycock. What I think is, he can do other things and still get involved in wrestling, right? I would not be shocked. Some people are going to kill me. What I'm about to say. I would not be shocked if he winds up at AEW if he gets released. I would not be shocked. I honestly would not be shocked. Why? Because, again, he's already a made name. The Miz is a made name, right? 20 years of experience, right? And, again, he's a guy who you can actually, use in various spots. If you want to give him a part-time deal with AEW, go right ahead. And he can do other stuff too. You know what I mean? Like he can do other things as well. Now, I mean, like I said, he can host shows and such. You know, do I think the Miz outgrown professional wrestling? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so because he's still involved in WWE and shit like that. But again, like he does love the business. Miz still loves the business, no doubt about it. I know Miz definitely loves professional wrestling, and he hasn't talked about retirement, and since he hasn't talked about anything, right? But I can see him, like I said, I can see him being in a part-time role in AEW where not only he's wrestling, but also he's he's hosting shows and shit like that. But that's just my opinion and such. Let me know what you guys think about Miz and such. And I'm gonna definitely holler at y'all tonight for sure. All right? Peace.